It pains my heart to ask this question, but we have to ask it anyway. Do the Vancouver Canucks regret signing Conor Garland and or Thatcher Demko this previous summer? Both of these players, American guys that had built good bodies of work for themselves with the Vancouver Canucks. Garland as the infamous forward inclusion in the Louis Eriksson trade, and Thatcher Demko, Vancouver's homegrown goaltender talent that was drafted a decade ago in 2014. Both Demko and Garland have carved out very good careers for themselves in the Vancouver Canucks organization. But the team is a lot different now compared to when they signed. And I think the big question as to whether or not the team regrets making these signings in the first place is valid, which is why we are making this video today. Also, because there was a clip on Canucks Conversation about it as well. Let's go over the tail of the tape first before we dive into the scoop. Thatcher Demko, 30 years old, 6'4", 192, left-handed catching goaltender, drafted by Vancouver, 36th overall back in 2014. Yeah, it's been that long. For the most part, we understand that Demko is an elite, Vezina-worthy goaltender when he is healthy, but as we had seen yesterday, the guy can't stay freaking healthy. This guy's gotten hurt so many times over the past few years, and he always gets rushed back, and he always gets hurt again. We started seeing symptoms of this literally when Demko was brand new in the league. And it was only 2 seasons ago in 23-24 where we finally saw what Demko can do when he is given a good team and he is the #1 guy for most of the year. .918 save percentage, a Vezina-nominated year. The only other season where Demko was as good was his 21-22 year, where he had a 64-game campaign and a similar .915 save percentage. Demko was one of the best when he is on, but he's just almost never available. It was a really good sign when the Vancouver Canucks signed Demko to the upcoming $8.5 million AAV contract that he will be on starting in 26-27. The guy was eligible for an extension once the offseason began, and he ended up signing. Similar situation with Conor Garland, who was heading into the last year of a $4.95 million contract before the Canucks extended him in the summer to a 6-year deal worth $6 million AAV. Literally the classic Louis Eriksson contract. So, for Conor Garland, this is a guy that was riding off of the momentum that he had as a very consistent and very reliable Canucks top 6 forward option. Ideally, if on a Stanley Cup championship contender team, Conor Garland would be a third-line guy. But as a top 6 leadership option in Vancouver, he is totally fine to have on this roster. Take a look at the numbers over here. Conor Garland has been a very consistent 40 to 50 point guy with the Canucks. This season, he is on pace for 47 points and 15 goals, which is quite remarkable considering just how bad the team has played. The guy is still scoring roughly the same amount of points as previous years, and despite the muffin of a shot that he has, he's on pace for 15 goals still. There is a lot to like out of Garland, but the question has been posed. With the Vancouver Canucks being so bad, with Thatcher Demko getting hurt again, and with this team already having shipped away Quinn Hughes to the Minnesota Wild, do the Vancouver Canucks regret the Garland and Demko contracts? Let's head over to the Canucks Conversation podcast, which went out there and debated this very question on their show. There was a clip posted on Twitter 2 days ago asking what the rush was to sign Garland and Demko to contracts in the offseason. Both would be seen as valuable rentals to contending teams if they didn't have those extensions attached to them. Now, this article goes out there and gives us the quote as to what Harmondale talks about on the program. Let's read his comments over here. If you knew Quinn Hughes was probably on his way out, what was the rush to re-sign Demko and Garland? I was really thinking about this last night. How valuable would Garland and Demko be if they were pure rentals right now? They would be 2 of the best rental players on the market, but now you've killed their, especially in the case of Demko, you've killed their asset value. I think some teams would have still been interested in acquiring him because of the talent level and just would have been willing to roll the dice. But now that he's got an extension, whereas of next season he's going to be paid $8.5 million, I don't think teams can justify paying up to bet on Demko's health with that contract extension in hand, and even with Conor Garland as well. I think he would have been more valuable as a pure rental to teams rather than now, where he's got a 6x6 attached to him. And that is very fair. It's very true, too. We are seeing all this hype for Kiefer Sherwood because he is a rental, because he is making $1.5 million a year, because he doesn't have any commitment attached to him. NHL GMs are just like that sleazy guy you see at the bar. Short term, no commitment, and as long as he gets the bang, he's all happy. There's a lot to like out of rental players if you're a top-tier team, and this season, with the amount of parity in the National Hockey League, there are a lot of teams that can be contending for those top spots. It just opens the pool up even more to whom it is can be asking for rentals. Vancouver is the worst team in the National Hockey League this season. They are last place, and they just traded their captain and best player away a month ago. You think this team is going to be on the cusp of contending anytime soon? It's why folks like Jason Brough have gotten all ticked off on social media, expressing frustration with how the team is unwilling to fully rebuild. Trade away guys that hold up roster spots for young players. Trade away guys that are above the age of 26. Trade away contracts and valuable players that genuinely would be of interest to other teams, and instead keep them on a Canucks squad that is just so not entertaining to watch, that is very difficult to follow, and that is very hard to get on board with. The Vancouver Canucks have made many mistakes in the past few years trying to remain competitive, and heck, Conor Garland's mere existence on this roster is the biggest symbolic representation of that very thing. The Vancouver Canucks traded away 1 year left of Eriksson, Beagle, and Roussel with a first-round pick that became Dylan Guenther attached to it to get Conor Garland, who, by all accounts, is a good player, and also Oliver Ekman-Larsson, whom, as we are seeing right now, is doing some very good work in Toronto. He won a Stanley Cup with Florida last year. That's a guy that the Vancouver Canucks had to buy out, and it totally tanked the way this team is able to maneuver around dollar-wise. Vancouver made that move in a desperate attempt to try and stay competitive. And I'm not saying that Alvin is necessarily Jim Benning 2.0, but if the heavens above, the owners above, are going out there and given the same sentiment that, hey, we got to try to make these moves, we got to try to stay competitive, we could be on the cusp of seeing similar damage. Maybe not to the same magnitude, but in the same direction with what's happening right now. And heck, a lot of folks are going to go out there and say that when it comes to Demko and Garland, oh, the reason Vancouver signed these guys is because Quinn Hughes wanted his buddies to stay. There is that element that I think exists and can be argued, but it also doesn't feel right to me. Jim Rutherford said he had a feeling that Quinn Hughes wasn't going to come back last year. Last year, like in 2024. So if that was the case, then why would you make these extensions? Why would you get the coach that Quinn Hughes wanted? Why would you give him the captaincy? Why would you do all these things to cater for the guy if you already had the feeling that you weren't going to make it work? And why would you sign Marcus Pettersson? Why would you trade the first-round pick for him and then sign him to an extension right after? He's playing like dog water on this team. The question is the same, and I want you to let me know your thoughts, despite the fact that they are good players. Do you think the Vancouver Canucks regret signing Conor Garland and Thatcher Demko? I hope you enjoyed this video, and bye.